My name's Hedwig. I have red socks.
Here in the shelter that I built that's keeping you alive? You don't think I see what you just did?
Hello and welcome to Bird's Eye View Media with another film comparison. This time we are going to look at Split versus 10 Cloverfield Lane. As always, we would like to begin with explaining why these two films match up together and are even worthy of a comparison. Split and Cloverfield Lane are both claustrophobic films. Both of these films take place usually in one room, and then they expand a bit to the building that the characters are trapped in, but it really takes until the conclusion of the movies to even leave these areas. Therefore, they do both feel very claustrophobic. They both involve a female protagonist who awakens in an undesirable situation. They were both released the same year, and both movies will tie into shared universes. Both of the protagonists are also at the mercy of eccentric antagonists. So these two films do bear interesting similarities. If you have not yet seen one of our film comparisons, this will be performed categorically. Whichever film wins the majority of these categories will be declared superior. The categories for this comparison will be the protagonist, the antagonist, the climax of the film, the theme of the films, and which film portrays better tension. So both of these movies really do rely on quite a bit of tension. They want us to feel the danger and the stress that these characters are going through. So this is an interesting and important category. So to begin, let's take a look at the protagonists.
It's so easy for you guys.
Now he says that
You do one
the
thing
air
and
is
predict the next.
contaminated.
In Split, we are introduced to a socially outcast main character named Casey. Casey is invited to Claire's birthday party, but seems to spend most of her time just looking off into a window. Claire felt that it would be polite and considerate to bring her, but obviously something is going on with Casey. We are quickly given information that Casey often gets in trouble for speaking out against teachers and is frequently sent to detention, which we later learn she does on purpose. Casey's first strategy when the girls are captured is to tell Marcia to pee herself when she is taken.
Pee on yourself. Pee on yourself.
So this is an interesting scene because it shows that Casey does have some quick thinking. Casey is clearly suffering from a history of abuse, which we are gradually shown as the film progresses in flashbacks. When these girls are captured, Claire suggests that the girls fight back in an effort to escape, but Casey has a very fatalist viewpoint, and she claims that they have no chance.
God, that's victim shit. Jesus. We should fight him. One punch from him would knock one of us out.
She clearly has a feeling of immediate resignation. She then turns on them and says a very important line.
Everything is so easy for you guys. It's not the way it's going to be in this situation.
This opening capture scene is very important because it creates a stark contrast between Casey and the other two girls, and this kind of plays into the theme of the movie, where Casey is clearly coming from a troubled past. She has a lot of emotional baggage with her, and the other two girls essentially have lived a very sheltered life. In Cloverfield, Michelle is taken after she is in a horrific car crash and awakens in some type of bunker. She's naturally very skeptical when she first awakens. She doesn't believe Howard until she comes face to face with a dying woman in an immensely powerful scene, which we will talk about later. She continues to feel uneasy, however, throughout the course of the film, because her intuition is telling her not to trust Howard. This is something we can see as she's always kind of feeling around, asking questions to Emmett, trying to match the histories that Howard is giving her, because she feels that something is not quite right. She's constantly thinking of ways to protect herself, and she's very skilled at this. She's even able to employ the aid of Emmett by gradually bonding with him. She gets very personal with him, and they learn a lot about each other, and she convinces him to help her, which is another very important part of innovation. She is then faced with a daring escape, And she proves to be very innovative in this as well. We see her tip over the vat of acid. We see her tip a rack onto Howard as she's trying to escape. So she's a quick thinker, and she uses her environment very well. And she's very capable in her planning while making her hazmat suit out of a shower curtain. So both of these protagonists are great. They both show being kind of lost, being in an unknown situation. Casey shows a lot of past pain. Michelle shows a lot of suspicion. But I do believe that Michelle shows more diverse internal conflict, especially with the current events that are happening. She's more innovative, and this really plays into more of a feeling of investment throughout this film. Casey's fatalist nature really does play into her past of abuse, but it also prevents us as the audience from getting as emotionally invested as we get in Michelle, as Michelle is constantly working and thinking through each situation. Therefore, the protagonist will go to 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Always been asleep.
I know what a traitor looks like. Understand?
This is a very interesting comparison because both of these characters have something that is not quite right with them, but they're done so in two very different ways. In Split, we're gradually introduced to Kevin's personalities. We first meet Dennis, who's the kidnapper and the main enforcer. We then meet Barry, who is the one who continually reaches out to Dr. Fletcher, calling for help. And then we meet Patricia. Patricia is probably my favorite because there's something very oddly sinister about her. She seems very nice on the surface, but you can tell that there's much more going on than what we see. There's something being planned, there's always something she's working on. Shortly after, we meet Hedwig, who is a very entertaining personality, but he is essentially used to clue the audience into the plot. This is where we learn about the light, where Hedwig controls which personality is in control, which one is manifesting to the girls. So he's used to really explain exactly what's going on, and he becomes a device for Casey to gradually manipulate in various attempts. So ultimately, Patricia, Dennis, and Hedwig are the main three who are driving the plot, while Barry is used to kind of clue Dr. Fletcher into the events. Dennis and Patricia arise to protect the whole of Kevin due to a past history of abuse. So they use what happened to Kevin to explain the manifestation of each character. Patricia is the planner. Hedwig was the age of the start of the abuse. So there is a reason for each one of these personalities. On the other side, we have Howard. Right when we meet Howard, there's something wrong with him. There's something off. The way that he cryptically speaks to Michelle when she first wakes up is not the way that a normal person would interact with a person in that situation.
What are you gonna do to me?
I'm going to keep you alive.
He frequently mentions his deceased daughter. He likes to bring Megan up. However, we gradually uncover that he's been dishonest in a variety of these stories about his daughter, and even a picture that was shown to Michelle. It later becomes apparent that Howard has a psychological obsession. He showed her that fake picture. He attempts to dress Michelle in Megan's clothes, and he doesn't even see her as an adult in a very key scene.
Michelle is a
girl, a child.
No, she's older. See, so she is a
Little princess.
woman. Little women.
As things get worse and trust dips, he fully executes Emmett, and he proceeds to tell Michelle he was going to hurt us and we can do whatever we want now. So this speaks to this odd fantasy that Howard has been harboring to turn Michelle into his daughter. This is very unsettling. He probably does want to keep Michelle safe, but only if she fills a twisted fantasy for him. So the question really becomes, is that worth it? So both of these antagonists are strong, but Kevin's personalities are weakened by the fact that some seem to exclusively serve the plot. James McAvoy's performance is great. It's amazing to see him switch personalities, especially at the climax when it happens so quickly. But John Goodman's Howard is more complex due to his often cryptic action. This makes him more believable as a motivated antagonist, while Kevin is really more of a spectacle. Kevin is awesome to watch. It's cool to see all of these personalities, but it just doesn't resonate like Howard does. Howard is someone who is so interesting because he seems completely normal at first, and then we just learn more and more and more, and he's so dangerous. So for that reason, Antagonist will go to 10 Cloverfield Lane. In Split, Casey uses Kevin's name to gain control from the Beast. So he has that transformation, he becomes the Beast, he cannibalizes the two other girls in a horrific scene. Here we see an amazing performance by James McAvoy. We see a bunch of these personalities come out only to lose control back to Patricia and Dennis, who then return it to the Beast.
Wait. No, don't do that. Don't do that. He can't handle reality. This horde of Patricia, Dennis, and the boy, their actions do not represent us. Oh, baby girl. They've been stealing control of the light from me. I'm gonna give the light to them now.
That ensues a long chase where Casey handles a shotgun. She puts up a good fight, but she does end up getting cornered. It is here that the Beast sees all of the scars on her body and recognizes that she's different and that she is pure. As a result, the Beast leaves her alone and allows her to survive.
Your heart is pure.
And the final scene of the movie, when people are watching this whole story on television, it ties directly to the film Unbreakable, which is a twist because we really didn't have a ton of evidence that suggested that until this final scene. So the conclusion for Split has that basic chase that you're bound to get in this type of movie, but it does keep the theme there and it ties us in to a very interesting film. 10 Cloverfield Lane. Now, before I start with the points of 10 Cloverfield Lane, this movie was originally called The Cellar and was ended up being rewritten so they could include it in the Cloverfield franchise. So the film originally was not intended to end the way that we got. The end of Cloverfield begins when Howard confronts Michelle after he kills Emmett. The following struggle and escape is excellent. If you compare the two chases in these films, I think the 10 Cloverfield Lane chase until Michelle escapes the house is better. It's more interesting. You see Michelle use her environment much more creatively, where Casey is basically running and taking shotgun shots. So it is more interesting to see until they get out of the house. When Michelle exits the bunker, it becomes cheap. We see that Cloverfield tie-in filled with alien encounters and near-death escapes, which kind of cheapens the climax. Like, it's interesting to watch, but it doesn't seem to really fit into the genre of this film. The original ending to The Cellar had Howard continue to chase Michelle outside of the farmhouse. She escapes, she sees a destroyed city, and that's it. It's an ambiguous end. In my opinion, that conclusion would have been much better. It would have been much less drawn out. It just would have felt perfect because the whole film was ambiguous. We weren't sure if Howard was true. We would have gotten that answer, but also not known what happens with Michelle. Unfortunately, the Cloverfield answer gave us a ridiculous twist, but it's not a twist in the way that Split did a twist. It's a twist in a cheap sci-fi type of way. Overall, 10 Cloverfield Lane is weakened by its seemingly forced connections with Cloverfield. It feels cheap. It devolves into a sci-fi action sequence. Therefore, Split's conclusion brings various concepts full circle and allows Casey to come into herself fully. Therefore, the superior conclusion is Split.
I think he did something.
I'm your uncle.
So the themes of these films are two very interesting concepts. In Split, we have a very recurrent theme of personal struggle and damage. This is something we learn about very quickly with Casey through our flashbacks with her uncle. It starts kind of as a happy memory, and then we gradually see where that abuse was coming from. People who are shattered and broken, they're spoken about multiple times by Dennis, Patricia. They're more than us, and then later the Beast. And this begins in the opening therapy session. The theme touches on dissociative identity disorder being controversial. Dr. Fletcher is fervently convinced of its authenticity, and she actually supports the theme that the Beast, Dennis, and Patricia are supporting. She appreciates that they're damaged. She's intrigued by this diagnosis. So she's fighting against the controversy in the field by defending its existence. And we also see the Beast say, "You've always been protected." So there's animosity towards those who have not been through these struggles, this damage. In Cloverfield, there is a theme of paranoia and constant distrust. Howard is a guy who spent his life preparing for the worst, only to lose his family. He ends up being perfectly prepared for this end-of-the-world scenario, and Michelle feels she has to escape. She feels she cannot trust Howard, so Howard's paranoia led him to that preparation. Michelle has interpersonal paranoia, where she feels she cannot trust Howard. She, even after seeing evidence of someone being sick, she still innately does not trust him. And Cloverfield raises an interesting question. What is the cost of this paranoia and this distrust? What might have happened if Howard was simply completely open with her from the start, instead of being controlling and less cryptic? What if Michelle went along with Howard's plan? It was weird, it was unhealthy, but what would have happened if she had been fully into it from the start rather than fighting him from the very first scene? It could have been a very different experience. So overall, Split's use of its theme is more consistent. It is there from the very start of the movie until the very end, the very last scene, especially through the climax. The theme is the entire reason that Casey even survives. In 10 Cloverfield Lane, the theme ends up kind of being dropped once Michelle decides that she has to escape. Once Emmett is dead and he finds evidence of her plan, that's it. The theme, paranoia, distrust, it's all culminated to a conclusion, and that's it. Therefore, the superior theme is in Split. And lastly, we are going to look at something a little bit more technical and a little bit less abstract, and that is the way that these films present tension. Both of these films are very tense films. There are situations we would never want to be in, and there's a lot of life and death situations. In Split, a lot of that tension comes from odd situations. One very simple scene is when Patricia takes them to the kitchen and is fixing them a meal. We begin to see little idiosyncrasies in Patricia's personality, and then Marcia makes an escape attempt only to be caught and a knife held right to her stomach in a very tense scene. Many of the scenes with Hedwig, in which Casey attempts to use him to escape, one of which, probably the most notable, is when she gets to his room, he shows her how he can dance. She's looking for the window that he had mentioned. We feel the danger in her plan, especially when we know her plan did not work. We feel danger. When are the other personalities going to come back and see that she was manipulating Hedwig again? There's a lot of tension in what could happen. There is also a very tense scene, it's much more standard, when Marcia attempts to slide the lock while the Beast begins to emerge. This is more of a timing type of tension. It's built up too slowly, but we do definitely feel it. And then when Dr. Fletcher is killed, obviously, there's a lot of tension there. 10 Cloverfield Lane probably has my single favorite tension scene, which was in the trailer. When Michelle very first tries to escape, she gets all the way to the second escape door, only to see a woman run up to the door and start pounding on it, saying, "Let me in." She's noticeably sick, she's dying, and this scene is amazing.
Open the door! Open it!
She's begging me.
You can't help her! No one can!
Ian, I'll be okay! I'll be okay. It really hardly touched me at all! Open the door!
Open the door!
That's an amazing scene, and what's so cool about it is it comes up with no build-up. She's just escaping, and then all of a sudden we're in a totally different dynamic, and we're feeling that stress. Another scene is the category game. They're just playing a game, trying to guess things off of clues, and some clues sound eerily relevant to an escape plan that the two, Emmett and Michelle, have been working on, and Emmett thinks Howard knows about the plan. And here, we're worried that Emmett is going to try to say something that ruins the plan and gets Howard against them. Michelle has to burst in and break that.
What you're doing, and I'm always watching. Always watching. I'm always watching.
Santa Claus.
The escape attempts are obviously very tense, and the scene when Emmett is shot is incredibly tense because we don't know exactly how Howard is going to react. Emmett gives an apology, tries to kind of smooth out the situation, only to lead to a horrific end. Ultimately, 10 Cloverfield Lane's tense scenes are better utilized because they often come up less expectedly. This jolts the audience and forces them to think quickly, portraying the contextual stress perfectly. Split's tension is often slowly built. The characters kind of gradually act, and these actions lead us to a tense situation, but this detracts the level of stress that is really portrayed. Therefore, the win will go to 10 Cloverfield Lane. Alright, so thank you guys very much for watching another film comparison. If you have not seen our other film comparisons, we have an entire playlist of these featuring all kinds of different matchups. We have 2 Tarantino matchups, Inception versus The Matrix, Hurt Locker, American Sniper. Check that playlist out, and if you liked this video, please subscribe. These take a significant amount of time to make. And also, if you have any ideas of a future film comparison, please leave us one in the comment. Thank you.